Hey, this is Chad. It is September 16th, 2021, and this is Drawn and Cornered. Stories for today sort of bleed over from yesterday a little bit. The Milley situation where he spoke to his Chinese counterpart at the tail end of the Trump administration, saying essentially that if anything happens between our two countries, if we are going to attack, I'll give you a heads up first. It won't be a surprise, which the thing I think is most interesting about this is not necessarily the phone call. The phone call is one thing, you can discuss whether or not that's right or wrong. The thing that is most interesting about this is the left's almost universal support for this phone call, for this mentality, for the idea that a military leader would supersede the control and capability of the president to save the nation or to do the right thing. It's been striking how many people are willing to completely abandon the power structure, the processes we have in place because they dislike Trump so much or because Trump was such a threat. The only noticeable outlier was Colonel Vindman actually came forward. You'll remember that name from the whistleblower in the Trump-Ukraine call, the one that turned Trump's Ukraine call in to the authorities. He came out and said, if this is true, this is a massive, massive issue, and Milley should immediately resign. There are people that are less polarizing, that have less issues in their background. He should immediately resign. That's the one noticeable outlier here. But across the board, politicians, left-wing pundits, almost anybody who has any affiliation with the left has come out in support of Milley against Trump. And it shows, one, I think the polarization that exists in this country, that is just purely team sport politics at this point, that no matter what your side does, as long as it's in opposition to the other side, it'll be swept under the rug. It'll be okay. It'll be accepted to some degree, possibly even encouraged. But the other thing I think that it speaks of is just how hated Trump was, that there is no limiting factor to what you would use to oppose Trump. Everything is on the board, whether that's lying, whether that is blowing out institutions or blowing out the rules. None of it matters because you just have to fight Trump at all costs, which leads to that next step. And the reason why that exists is because Trump isn't just somebody who had different ideas. Trump isn't just somebody who had different policies or wanted to go in a different direction with the country. He was actually evil. He's actually pathological. He's actually a psychotic. He's actually so dangerous to this country that to support him, to encourage him, to push anything that he is affiliated with is actually detrimental for the country and needs to be stopped at all costs. It reminds me of that old philosophical idea about if you were to be able to go back in time and you could meet Hitler as a baby, would you kill him? And it sets up this priority structure in your head of nobody wants to kill a baby. Obviously, that's extraordinarily awful. But also, he had done nothing wrong at that time. But you know where he's going to go. You know what he's going to become. Would you be willing to kill him? Would you be willing to take him out at that point to save the world from what is an inevitability? And it seems like this is where we've gotten in politics a little bit, that it's not just about fighting the good fight on policy or issue. It's about the other side is evil. And because of that evil, we need to stop them at all costs. And that's not just about winning elections. That's not just about getting your ideas in the arena to oppose whatever their ideas is. It's that you need to vilify that opposition. You need to vilify them. You need to dehumanize them as much as possible, because that's how you can then crack down on them in ways that otherwise, if you understood their humanity, if you understood their side, would not be a possibility. And it is an extremely dangerous path to start down, and strangely is one that has led to a lot of problems with Gina Carano. This is the issue that she ran into, who, again, famously was fired by Disney off of The Mandalorian because she tweeted out parallels between the vilification of the Jews by the Nazis in order to dehumanize them and then eventually subjugate them and destroy them, to the dehumanization of the right by the left to ultimately vilify them and then control them, push them to the outside, socially outcast them, whatever. That corollary, again, probably is a little bit heavy-handed, probably unnecessary, but still exists. The ultimate idea behind that, or the notion that needs to be grabbed, is not the it's going to happen again or concentration camps are being set up, but the idea is that you are putting an entire group of people into a box to destroy any sort of humanity in them, and thus allow yourself to ostracize them, to socially exclude them, to perhaps even lawfully exclude them, so that your point wins. It's a win at all cost type of mentality. And you see this with the vaccine mandates. You see this with the way Joe Biden talked about the unvaxxed, and that they're losing patience, and that they won't be able to work, and jobs will be lost for them, and money will be lost for them, which is really terrible because the majority of people that are unvaxxed are not particularly well off financially. Class-wise, we were talking about folks that sit on a lower rung than a lot of others that are not vaxxed. So you're then also stripping money away from them, thus making that problem even worse. It's a whole mess, and it doesn't account for the idea that people have their own minds, have their own capability, and can make up their own minds, and have the autonomy to do that and the authority to do that given by the Constitution. It's something where we've gotten away from that. And now any opposition to the ideas that I have is evil. It's not just different, it's not just wrong, it's evil. And that's a really terrible trend to go down. So I would caution you, and I know this feels a lot like a PSA at this point, but I would caution you as somebody who engages in news and is involved in this, to make sure you are not doing this, right? Be the change you want to see in the world type of thing. Don't allow yourself the opportunity to think that the other side only thinks this way because they're stupid, they're uninformed, they're evil, all of these things. One of the hardest for me has always been abortion, but find people that disagree with you. Find people that have opposing viewpoints that you love, that you respect, and understand that perfectly right-minded, thoughtful, considerate, compassionate people can carry completely different views from you, and hold on to that dearly, because it seems to be slipping away from this country at a fairly rapid pace. The next story that I wanted to cover very quickly was a deal that the US and the UK entered into with Australia, talking about nuclear submarines and the technology that's available there. It seems as though this is all sort of pointed at China to recognize, hey, we still have influence over here. We're still going to be controlling these seas. We're going to allow Australia to control these seas with nuclear-powered submarines. Essentially sort of not a proxy war, but definitely tapping China on the shoulder saying, hey, we're still going to be involved here. The only problem with this deal is that it excluded France, and France felt a little bit like we stepped on their toes. They've got a pretty good relationship with Australia. They said it's regrettable that this decision was made without us. Talked about a stab in the back and all sorts of this. So it seems, again, that Joe Biden's foreign policy and diplomatic gravitas is failing, which, again, should not be a surprise. Everybody who talked about Joe Biden prior to his election talked about foreign policy failures far and wide. It's just any foreign policy issue that this guy has ever been involved with in his 50 years in politics has been wrong. I mean, this is the guy that opposed the Bin Laden raid. So this is par for the course, but it's also the possibility that this is worsening relationships with allies who are already stretched thin, who are already kind of annoyed with the way that we got out of Afghanistan, just being pushed further and further. And hopefully, for the sake of the country, Joe Biden kind of figures his way out of this, or figures out how to better deal with our allies and not spit in their face or to do things completely wrong. But I don't know that that's going to happen. So maybe it's just a crossing fingers moment. Obviously, I can't talk to him, so hope is all I've got. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, comments, think I'm totally off my gourd, leave a comment down below. If you want to see this type of content routinely, little snippets of news and analysis in the morning, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you again tomorrow.